Americans appear quite willing to spend whatever it takes to fix bridges across the country. The American public appears very willing to spend almost whatever it takes, it looks like, to repair bridges around the country in the wake of the Minneapolis bridge disaster. Our weekend Gallup poll asked Americans if they would be willing to spend over $100 billion in order to repair or rebuild bridges around the country. We found an overwhelming 7 out of 10 plus Americans said yes, indeed, they would be willing to authorize Congress to vote that legislation and spend that money almost immediately, it looks like to us, based on the data. One reason why so many Americans may be willing to authorize Congress to spend that money is they have been following news of this disaster closely. In fact, 78% of Americans say they have followed news of the Minneapolis bridge collapse very or somewhat closely. That actually is quite high. The average for all news stories that we have tracked with this news interest measure is 60%. Americans also, at least a majority, say that this is not an isolated incident up on the Mississippi River in Minneapolis-St. Paul, but rather is a systemic problem with bridges all over the country. Now, this is not overwhelming, but as you see, 57-37 is the margin where Americans say this is indicative of a systemic problem rather than being isolated. Finally, are Americans themselves worried about bridges that they cross every day going to and from work, for example? I would say they are. 67% of Americans say they are very or somewhat concerned about bridges that they drive over every day. That again underscores the willingness, we think, of Americans to say to Congress, spend as much money as it takes, but get our infrastructure in order. Join us tomorrow on the Daily Briefing. We'll look at some new data on Iraq and some possible slightly better news for the Bush administration. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, editor-in-chief of the Gallup Poll with Democracy on Demand.